I know. So good afternoon. Can you hear me? So I just sent Clifford the message that I'd like to connect on LinkedIn to increase the number of connections, but also the quality. And the one thing he didn't mention, I don't know when I joined LinkedIn, but it was probably very, very late, not 2003. So you should also put on the slides the fastest growing networks on LinkedIn. So I'm excited to be here. This is my second time in Australia, and I have a sense that this time is completely different than last time, because I think that now the Israeli technology ecosystem and the Australian ecosystem are really going to connect. Maybe we're just assembling the last bricks in the bridge that I hope will be a fast lane to connectivity around technology and innovation. And I'm very happy to see people like Paul with SquarePeg investing in Israel, and I'm looking forward to work with more Australian strategic partners in our companies and also find investors in Australia to invest also in the venture capital community in Israel. My presentation today is, I did not prepare slides because I didn't really have an idea what I'm going to say. I still don't. But I was asked to speak about impact investing. So I don't have the opportunity to tell you how great Pitango is and how great our companies are. But I do want to share with you a new way of investing and probably a major change that is taking place in the world of investments. In the past, people used to think that the world is divided into two pockets. There's one pocket to invest in order to make money. There is another pocket that is dedicated to make donations. And people try not to be confused between those two pockets. But in today's world, like in every industry, innovation is arising also into the investment landscape. And actually today we have suits with many, many pockets. Some of them are only for profit, some of them are only for donation. But in between, we find lots of ideas how to combine what we call the double bottom line kind of investments. I believe that this is the beginning of a tremendous trend within the investment phase. Lots of people do not really understand what impact investing is. And actually, when we started to make impact investments, I was not sure that I was aware of the fact that we are doing impact investing. But I'll try to share with you some of the ideas behind it. And maybe I'll do it around maybe 2 or 3 examples of the things that we are doing, Pitango is doing through our community venture activity. And I'll start with the first one. The first one was actually 5 years ago when the Israeli government launched a tender to set up a fund to invest within the Israeli Arab community. As you know, Israel is a startup nation. We have 8.2 million people. But it is a very diversified society. More than 1.1 million people live outside of Israel. 1.7 million people are Israeli Arabs who are not really part of the ecosystem of the startup nation. There's close to 1 million people who are ultra-Orthodox, who are not part of the ecosystem. And the challenge is how to bring about the entire community to be part of the startup nation. Because when you live in a small country, and you focus your economy on productivity, on the individual, on the human resources, you have to utilize every aspect of the human resources. We were blessed in the 90s to absorb 1 million newcomers from Russia, who many of them have become part of the ecosystem of the technology sector and helped us grow the economy through the 90s. But we are very short of talent. We can create many jobs, but we don't have people to fulfill those jobs with. So Pitango decided to focus on the challenge that the government raised to set up the first fund to invest within the Israeli Arab community. And we created the fund. It was just like we did in Yozma 23 years ago, when the government really took the risk with us and gave upside to investors who will participate in this game. As a result, we set up the Alba Water Fund, which is a $15 million fund. $20 million are invested by the Israeli government or committed by the Israeli government. $30 million were raised in the Israel and abroad. And we told the investors that invested in us, this is a for-profit game. We intend to invest in companies for profit. However, nobody has done it before, and we cannot guarantee that you will make money. For that, of course, when we have exits, we distribute the money. First, it will go to the investors, and after the investors recuperate from their investment, then the government will do that. And if they're profitable, if it's profitable, the government will basically waive 50% of the profits to the other LPs. We launched the Al Bawader Fund. We started to look for Arab entrepreneurs. And through the process, we have discovered something interesting that many of you probably know or observe, or at least understand. That you have an internet market, huge internet market, that allows you to grow lots of startup companies, lots of great companies. And the internet market, as we know it, is an English-speaking internet market. But over the years, next to the English-speaking internet market, we have seen the Chinese-speaking internet market arising and creating huge companies. We know Alibaba, we know Baidu, we know Tencent, we know other. And actually, when you come to think about it, the internet market in Chinese potentially is bigger than the one that we have in English. And when you think about it, going forward, as an economy, maybe the Indian economy will be bigger than the Chinese. At the same time, the Middle East that we live in, that Israel is part of, actually has more than 350 million people who live in 23 countries. They are not homogeneous, but they speak Arabic. And when you think about it, there's an opportunity maybe to create a market which is based on Arabic-speaking internet platform. The internet market is demonstrating to us that basically there are about 130 million people in the Middle East that have mobile phones, smartphones, where they consume the news, where they watch a lot of videos, they connect, and of course they're using LinkedIn, they're using Facebook, they're using other social networks. The Middle East has been divided about 100 years ago based on an agreement that was signed between France and the UK. It's called the Sykes-Picot Agreement. They draw lines, they created nations, but unfortunately, as many of us see today in television, the Middle East is deteriorating. Something new has to replace the old structure. And we believe that the future of the Middle East that Israel is part of is to build an Arabic-speaking internet market and bring entrepreneurship, bring technology and innovation to the region from Israel and from abroad, and actually try to turn the region with a startup nation to become a startup region. So our investments within the Israeli Arab community in Israel is actually to build companies that are internet-oriented in Arabic, addressing the market that we never touched really, which is the Middle East market. When you think about it, Israel is really focused on creating startup companies that are English speakers. Recently also we have some companies focused on China. We compete with American companies mostly, or European companies, and we're competing over the English-speaking markets in the world. But what about if Israel starts to build great companies that will be in Arabic, addressing the Middle East market, competing with Arab countries, competing with Arab companies, and actually creating a new market that never existed before. This is, in my view, that was our first step into the social investing or impact investing, where you are investing, but you are trying to make an impact. You are trying to do something to change something. The world is now emerging on many, many other ways on invest with a purpose or create double bottom lines. The one bottom line, of course, is the financial one. The other one is the impact that you would like to achieve. So Al Bawader is now in its fifth year. We have a portfolio of companies. It's not easy to run a fund which is investing within the Israeli Arab community, especially not in the recent days. But we discovered that there's great talent, there are great entrepreneurs within the Arab community, and there is a great potential for the Middle East to build its future based on Arabic-speaking internet market. Some people say that when you invest, when you are creating impact investment platforms, you have to give up the profitable side in order to achieve social targets or impact. But I think that the world is understanding now that you don't have to give up on anything. You can do things that are doing good, and they can be profitable. Some of the companies that I've met in Europe which are adopting this strategy, which is not measuring themselves only by the financial side, but also how they change the world for better, they claim that in the short run, basically, they may be sacrificing some of their financials, but in the long run, they believe that they are building stronger and bigger companies. When we are looking at the global economy, we used to measure global economies by rate of growth. We are used to measure them by GDP, by productivity. But we very little measure how we are doing on the lower side of our economy. How do we pull out a tremendous amount of people from poverty and bringing them to become part of the middle classes? China has done an amazing work on this, bringing a lot of people to the middle classes. India is trying to do it, and other countries as well. So when we look at economy, it's not enough to grow your economy, it's not enough to grow your GDP. You also need to pull out the audience from poverty and bring them to the middle classes. I think with technology and innovation we can do that, because technology and innovation makes the world much more affordable for young people. We are seeing what sharing economy is doing to our world. One of the examples that we have is the car industry, where the CEO of Uber said basically the world has built 1 billion cars, but 4% of the time they drive, 96% of the time they are idle. So it's not so efficient. So I think that the world is moving into a situation where companies in the future will not only be measured by how well they are doing financially, but they will also be measured by social side of the coin. They will be measured how they do with the environment and how do they do with society and making their societies stronger and better. The second one will be very short because we're running out of time. But the second thing that Pitango has done, we created a new platform which is called Impact First. And here we are investing in technology companies which are trying to create companies which are trying to make the world a little bit better, where the intention of the founders come from a deep social root. I'll give you one example of an investment that we've made. We've made an investment in a company which is called Angel Sense. The company was started by two parents who have autistic children, and they had a problem how to monitor their child when he's far away from their reach, 24/7. Those children are being taken to different practices away from their parents, and they need to understand what is their situation, where they are they in the right place at the right time, do they suffer from stress, are they under anxieties? So they created a technology platform that the child has or carries on him, where they know all the time where the child is and what he's doing. Just recently, there was an article from, actually it's a video at CNN, that a woman spoke about her child. She had an autistic child that was about to be abused. She managed to save her child using Angel Sense system, and she spoke on television, and she said that she had a chance to work with Israeli technology that actually saved the life of her child. The reason we focus on technology is because this is the strength of Israel, but also if you're doing something right, you can actually take it and proliferate it to other areas in the world. So I'd like to conclude, because time is out, and say the following. When you are investing in companies in the future, think also about what are you investing. Is it a meaningful company? Are they doing something to contribute to the world, making better, even if you are not impact investors? Because at the end of the day, it's not only about making money, but it is about trying to make our world better. And there's nothing better than technology that you can do as an investment platform in order to make the world better. Thank you very much.
Chemi, thank you. No, because this. Thanks, Chemi. LinkedIn contacts have gone up by 200 while you've been speaking, and Medved's been distracted outside, so you're catching him. We now have 3 impact investments we're going to show you in quick succession. And the first will be Ariel Zilberstein. I'll ask Ariel to come up. Robbie Stark who was meant to be here, is now the keynote speaker at an ag conference in Brazil. So unfortunately won't be here, but we'll be screening his video directly after Ariel.